Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second event in our series, Moving Literacy Forward in Maryland, Literacy in Autism. We're so excited that you are here, and thank you for taking time to join us this evening. My name is Susan White. I am one of the board members of the Reading Link Maryland. In this series, we are taking a closer look at different student groups to focus on what unique instructional strengths and needs they present with when considering instructional practices and literacy and development. I want to express our sincere appreciation and gratitude to our panelists this evening. We thank them for sharing their knowledge, their experience, and their time with us all. Before we get started with our event, we also want to thank our co-sponsors, Awesome, or the Autism Society of Maryland, and MILE, the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity, who also helped advertise our event. If Melissa Rosenberg, the executive director of Awesome, is here with us this evening, could she give us a wave?
Yep, I'm here, if you can see me. Thank you for having this.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be part of it.
And we also have Dr. DJ Bolger, who is here representing MILE. We also want to let you know that the event is being recorded and it will be available on our website and YouTube channel. We will also have a feedback form for you to complete at the conclusion of our session. We want to hear about ideas about future sessions you're interested in learning about, as well as your feedback about tonight's event. I would now like to introduce Dr. DJ Bolger. Dr. Bolger is an associate professor at the University of Maryland in the College of Education. He is the co-director of the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity, also known as MILE, with Dr. Simone Gibson of Morgan State University. He also directs the Laboratory for the Neurodevelopment of Reading and Language at the University of Maryland. Thank you, Dr. Bolger, for supporting our event this evening. He is now going to introduce our moderator.
Sorry, my mute button is slow. Thank you, everybody. And I'd like to, like I said, thank the Reading League for putting on this event and really being a guide in the state for all things literacy to so many, both parents and educators alike. And I would like to, before I introduce our speaker today, or our lead today, I'm going to actually launch a quick survey. And if people wouldn't mind just taking a second or two to fill this out while, and I'll give everybody about 60 seconds to 2 minutes to fill out the questions. All right. So as people come in, I will allow them to continue to share to answer the questions, and I'll repost the survey disappeared. I'm sorry. I'll try to repost it. Oh, relaunch poll. All right. I will relaunch it at the end so everybody gets a chance as people are still filtering in. So as our lead for tonight, I really want to thank and honor Dr. Veronica Kang from the University of Maryland College of Education. Dr. Kang is an assistant professor in our counseling, higher education, and special education. She is a special education specialist. And she comes to us from the University of Illinois, Chicago, where she got her PhD in special education. And she also holds degrees in measurement and evaluation statistics, as well as in educational leadership with neurodevelopmental disabilities. So Dr. Kang's research has focused on both families and schools and the intersection of multicultural approaches and ways of working with children with autism, and has really looked at how families from all different cultures intersect and interact in this world of autism spectrum disorders. And this is her expertise in both families and communities, as well as with school systems, is something that is unparalleled. And I think it's just such a great expertise to have in this day and age, where having that ability to go between both families, homes, and schools is something that we need to do. Without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Kang, or bring on Dr. Kang. And go ahead, Veronica.
Thank you, Dr. And thank you everyone for being here, both panelists and our audience members tonight. To talk about autism and literacy today, with all the coming from different backgrounds. I see that in our survey we have a good number of family members, general education teachers, special education teachers, as well as few folks from higher education. So we're very excited to have you here. I'm seeing in the chat some more responses in terms of where folks are joining us from. So welcome to our event tonight. This is our agenda today. So we will have our wonderful panelists responding to some of the questions related to successes, needs, and best practices for moving literacy of autistic learners forward. Each panelist will spend about 10 minutes or so to engage in conversation with me, and then we'll make sure towards the end we leave some time for your questions as well from the audience for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll make sure we end with the feedback survey that we would love your input on. And then also, I believe we have some future events from Mile and the Reading League of Maryland that we'll be sharing with you. So I'll go ahead and get started with a quick overview of autistic students in Maryland and some of the ongoing work around evidence-based practices for literacy development. And then I'll dive right into introducing our first panelist and engage in further conversation. So we know that nationally, the statistics around autistic individuals is about 1 in 36 children being identified with autism. Comparison to that, in the state of Maryland, we know that about 2.3% of children are identified with autism. And then specifically within the public school system, you can see on the right side table here, you can see the fonts are very small, but you can see that for students of ages 3 to 21 years old who have a disability, autism highest prevalence, which is about 15.55% of students with disabilities being served in the Maryland public school. This kind of highlights one of the importance, the reasons, the rationale behind why we're talking about supporting and working with our autistic learners and supporting their literacy skills. We know that in the literature, in just general literacy instruction literature, we know that there are wonderful curricula like the dialogic reading, adaptive shared reading, using modeling and prompting. Those are all wonderful strategies that we, as educators and family members, we use to support the literacy development, whether that's vocabulary, it might be even conversation, back and forth conversation, it might be reading, comprehension skills, phonological awareness, all of these different literacy skills. But one thing that I wanted to highlight in this slide here is that we want to really understand preferred and common communication modality is when we're working with students. That might be the use of AAC devices. We have our wonderful speech therapist here, and then one of our panelists today who will be talking about AAC usage. It might be the use of gestures. It might be vocalization, maybe the word approximation, 1 or 2 syllable building up to a. It might be use of few single words or parts of sentence knowing how our autistic students communicate and how in terms of their receptive and expressive language, and being informed by that to prepare the relevant material. So you can see examples here that I have visuals of 2 different vocabularies that I was talking about. We were kind of doing vocabulary and also rhyming practice in my literacy project with our autistic preschoolers. And you can see there's a text representation, there's a visual representation, and the students can either point to the picture or the text that represents the we're talking about. They can be looking at it, they can be trying to make the approximation of the word, they can be saying the full word. So again, really thinking about how artistic learners communicate and then preparing the materials accordingly has been a very helpful experience for me as an educator. And also that allows us to prepare the type of questions we're asking, the type of modeling we're preparing for artistic learners. And then we can also prepare in terms of what type of responses to look for. Because as educators, I think we all probably agree, and family members as well, whatever efforts our students use, whether that is a gesture or a vocalization, any form of nonverbal verbal communication or AAC device usage that they're communicating with, we want to acknowledge, because that interactive process is so important as we're trying to understand what type of literacy skills our students are presenting to us, and then building on that to inform our next set of instructions. So I wanted to highlight that and share some visual representation of how I incorporated that. So you can see on the right side, during the COVID season, actually, I had the great opportunity to work with autistic preschoolers, and I was in the state of Illinois back then. And you can see myself in that Zoom box over there, having 2 different choices that my student can choose from. And I started with just a verbal prompting and then waiting for a couple of seconds for my student to respond, and then leading up to a phonemic or a visual prompt. And then if that is necessary, doing kind of a full demonstration of what the response might be. So maybe, so I think this was a question where I was asking about, where did the story take place? And the answer was the home. So then after I waited with some time delay, I provided man so that my student can either point to or kind of imitate kind of the modeling that I've provided for them. So just an example of different ways of me trying to understand how my student communicates and using that information to plan my materials and my questions and my looking for my students' responses. We also know that in addition to knowing how our students communicate with different modalities, we also want to make sure the learning experience is engaging and motivating, and it's interesting for our learners, right? So some of the, I'm sure we all know some of the evidence-based practices supporting kind of positive behavior and engagement of our learners during instruction. That might include what you see on the right side here, kind of the priming steps. So really making it very clear in terms of what the student is getting into as they're getting into the literacy learning opportunities. So I have my first, we're reading the book, then we're going to be answering some questions, and then last we have our favorite music activity. So I made it very clear so that they know what they're kind of getting into. And then we also used a very kind of broken down, we have divided the activities into smaller steps. So we're working towards some of their favorite activity or material, so that we're taking breaks when a movement break is needed, or we can take breaks after they answer a certain number of questions, so that instead of us trying to go through perhaps the entire sequence of questions or sequence of activities, I'm breaking down into a feasible and manageable smaller chunks, so that we're acknowledging kind of the smaller steps that our student is working towards. So this kind of portrays that especially for any learners, but especially for autistic learners, learning will look it might look different for every learner, right? So even if we say, oh, I'm working with a child or student with autism, one student with autism might look very different, and they might communicate with us differently than another student with autism, and what they find engaging and super interesting and motivating, that might be different for another student. So I wanted to highlight that point in terms of making the literacy learning engaging and motivating for our learners. Last slide I wanted to highlight before I jump into our wonderful group of panelists tonight is kind of the creative usage of natural agents, our students' preferred activities and technology. So on the right side here, you're seeing a visual representation of another early literacy intervention project I was part of. And you're seeing an autistic student and their brother in their home setting using an AC device with some preferred play activities to practice some vocabulary skills. So something I wanted to highlight on this slide here is that, of course, as as adult figures, we have a lot of knowledge related to literacy that we can teach and translate to our children or students, but we can definitely think about involving peers, involving sibling figures, and not only thinking about kind of our typical reading books and answering questions, but also thinking about maybe perhaps daily routines or play activities to create opportunities for vocabulary learning. Maybe it might be opportunity to learn some sentence formation, answering questions, practicing some phonological awareness. So one example is in our summer program project in Rockville area, we work with autistic youth every summer, targeting different skills. One of them is literacy, and we might be using shaving cream to talk about different letters. We might be using dot markers to practice the writing skills and spelling skills. So I just wanted to share some of the strategies and activities and approaches that have been really successful in making sure to engage and creating an inclusive opportunity for the autistic students that I have been having the fortune to work with. So I hope this is a nice overview for us to get started with. And then I do want to now switch gears to our wonderful panelists who will hopefully discuss further about some of the topics that I've mentioned, including the use of technology, AC devices, using natural environment activities, and collaborating with family members. So first we have our wonderful first panelist, Miss Megan Fleury. She's an instructional specialist at the Infants and Toddlers program, Prince George's County Public Schools. If I go to the next slide, I will have the further description about her, but I do want to also do a quick overview of our remaining panelists. We have Dr. Seyma Intepe. She's an assistant clinical professor of special education at the University of Maryland. She'll be talking with us a little bit about professional development, teacher training related to autism and literacy. We have Miss Lauri Silver. She's a special education technology expert and instructional facilitator in the instructional access team. We have Miss Toni Simmons. She's a speech language pathologist working with pre-kindergarten to 5th grade students. We have Miss Sarah Cooper, 2nd and 5th grade special education teacher and special education co-instructional team leader from Howard County. And last but not least, we have our wonderful Miss Stephanie Carr. She's the curriculum and instruction certified dyslexia advocate, also an educational consultant at SL Carr Educational Consultants and Parents to 3 children with disabilities. So though that's kind of our wonderful list of panelists, so I'll dive into our first panelist tonight, Miss Megan Fleury. She's an early interventionist with over a decade of experience in the field. She currently works as an instructional specialist in the PGCPS Infants and Toddlers program. She supervises and supports the early intervention service providers who conduct home visits with children and families. Prior to her work, as an instructional specialist, she worked as a special educator for Prince George's County Infants and Toddlers program and a service coordinator for the Miss Fleury earned her master's degree in special education from the University of Maryland College, and she's also currently working toward her doctoral education at the UMD. She's passionate and advocate for the benefits of early intervention. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and dive into our first question. Ms. Fleury, we would love to hear from you a little bit about, given the nature of family-centered practice in intervention, how do you see early childhood educators collaborating with families to support early language development of young learners?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Dr. Kang. I'm really excited to be here to talk a little bit about early intervention and early childhood special education in Maryland. So in Maryland, the Infants and Toddlers program is our early intervention program. This program serves students age birth to 4. And students in the infants and toddlers program are on what's called an IFSP. It's a little bit different than an IEP, which many people are familiar with. IFSP stands for Individualized Family Service Plan. And the whole focus of early intervention is to collaborate with and empower families, the families of children in our program. Children qualify for the infants and toddlers program for a couple different reasons. If a child has a diagnosed condition that has a high probability that they might experience a developmental delay, they qualify for our program. Children can also qualify for our program if they have a 25% delay in any area of development based on their age, or if they're experiencing what we call atypical development. So they're doing what we'd expect them to do, but they might not be doing it in the way that we would expect them to. So for example, maybe a 2-year-old can say lots of words and label all the things they see, but it's really hard for them to say something like, I'm hungry. So we'd want them to be using those words to functionally, explain to us what they want, and they're not quite doing that. They might also qualify for our program. So there's a couple different reasons, and we use, some clinical judgment and just, to qualify students for the infants and toddlers program. But those are the 3 main ways how we see students qualifying. So in Maryland, what we're working toward as a whole early intervention program is utilizing a reflective coaching approach in the student's natural environment. So what we've learned over time, of course, through research, is that children this age, children in early intervention, birth to 4, learn best with the people that they love and care about and who they're comfortable with in the places where they're most comfortable. So that might be home, childcare, the library, maybe. I've done early intervention visits at McDonald's and at Walmart and, different places in the community where families want support and students are comfortable. It can be with mom, grandma, foster parent, auntie, babysitter, childcare provider. So we're pretty flexible with where and with whom we are providing our services, because we want the services to be with the people that are most comfortable with our learners and, the people that our learners are most comfortable with. In terms of collaborating to support early language development, and we use a total communication approach. So we want to try, our learners are very young, and we want to try to coach our families in as many different communication modalities as possible to help our learners be as successful communicating as possible. A huge focus of our learning is functional communication. So we'll use everything from core vocabulary, which the picture on here is an example of a core vocabulary board, signs, gestures, pictures, words, however a student communicates best, that's what we want to use. And then of course, we're also using visual aids, and Dr. Kang talked about this earlier, first then boards, visual schedules, social stories, different ways that we can support them in their language development, and for each individual and unique student.
All right. Thank you so much, Megan. You talked about the importance of that social exchange and the daily routines that really build onto our learners, learning and developing new literacy and language skills to express their needs, requests, emotions, and then that building on to further skills to talk about what happens in stories and talking about the different ideas and content happening in literacy materials. So thank you for highlighting that importance of those foundational early literacy skills.
Sure.
All right, so now now that we talked a little bit about the importance of collaboration with family members and thinking about the natural environment, I would love to hear from you how our early childhood programs are supporting literacy development and also transition from early childhood programs to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the start, from a learner's very first day in the infants and toddlers program, we're getting ready. We're working towards school readiness. From birth to 3, school readiness looks a little bit different. We're not really focused from the birth to 3 age on those ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. What we're really focusing on with these learners is helping them to develop like Dr. Kang just said, those functional skills so that they can participate in their everyday routines to get their needs met, to help those around them understand what they want, what they need, build relationships and friendships, sharing their emotions. It's not all at this age about those pre-academic skills quite yet. So from the beginning of their time in early intervention, we work toward we use a child outcome summary as a way to make sure that we are focusing on those readiness skills. So the child outcome summary focuses on developing positive social emotional skills and relationships, acquiring and using knowledge and skills, and using appropriate behavior to meet needs. And these functional areas of development really do encompass all areas of development in different ways. And we're using this child outcome summary as a way to make sure that our students, our learners are making progress in all of these school readiness areas. And then after age 3, in Maryland, families have a choice to either stay with an extended IFSP until age 4 or move to an IEP. An IEP, of course, has that general focus on pre-academic skills. But the extended IFSP option, we continue to use our reflective coaching approach to working with families in the natural environment. However, we do add some more of those pre-academic skills into a child's IFSP. So we focus on language, pre-literacy, and numeracy specifically, so that once one of our learners hits age 3, we're really starting to hone in on those pre-academics.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think you're kind of highlighting that importance of relations. In the blue column, I'm seeing the relations with adults, other children. So you mentioned about building friendship as well. And I can think of maybe perhaps what other educators or parents on our panel today might kind of share with us in terms of what kind of home-based practices might look like to support literacy skills. Maybe perhaps if teachers or parents have used peer or sibling collaborative opportunities to support literacy skills. I'm really excited that you brought this up and to hear from our other panelists as well related to this topic.
Yeah, and I think just one last thing, I'm sorry, Dr. Kang, is that we want the whole family involved in early intervention. So siblings are more than welcome to participate. We have older brothers, older sisters, younger siblings, joining in to engage our learners and make it fun for them. So it's very much a family, it's a very family-centered program. So we want everyone involved. So yes, building that relationship is really important.
I love that. I really love hearing about different ways to really bridge kind of the home and school-based practices, and kind of connecting to what you shared from the early intervention perspective. I'm curious what our next panelists can share in terms of what that school and home partnership looks like to support the literacy skills. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, before we move on to our second panelist, I have our final question for you. We have heard some your success stories around collaborating with family members and the importance of that social interaction and routines and kind of supporting that foundational early literacy skills and also preparing our learners for transition to kindergarten. Would you be willing to share maybe some of the challenges you might have run into and also some of the solutions that addressed these possible challenges related to kind of the literacy development and literacy instruction?
Yeah, great. I'd love to. So one challenge that we've run into, and we've actually been really lucky to build a relationship with Dr. Kang, is making sure that our providers so infants and toddler services typically happen in a family's home. So it's very, very important that the service providers from the infants and toddlers programs, our special educators, our speech language pathologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, we have social workers and nursing staff. It's very important that everyone comes in understanding autism, understanding neurodiversity affirming practices, and understanding culturally affirming practices, as well as, of course, pre-literacy and how all these things work together so that we can best support our families. So, making sure, some of these topics are things that some staff members hadn't been trained in. So that was one of our challenges. We want to ensure that our staff members are going in trained in and understanding these important, these important practices. And so a solution that we came up with, very excited to say, is that we've been working with Dr. Kang, and she's been coming to train a lot of our staff members, actually our entire staff, on these practices, specifically autism, neurodiversity affirming practices, and culturally affirming practices. And we also have a partnership that's coming in to teach specific practices related to pre-literacy and using literacy as a way to teach a variety of topics to our students. So that was one thing that we've been working on. And then another challenge that we come across sometimes is just connecting families with some resources. We are not classroom based. So when we're thinking about early literacy, something that we work really hard to do is help families build their, the family and the learners libraries at home, so that these are things we can tap into when we're in the home. Some families have a beautiful library and some families are still building theirs, but we're there to support that. The Infants and Toddlers program in Prince George's County specifically, we have what we call our early kits, which is engagement, activities, routines, language, and intervention. And every quarter we bring a book and manipulatives to go with the book. So maybe if it's the little blue truck, we have a little blue truck with the book so that we can use this is for all families to keep, and they can use the book and the toy together. We have a monthly subscription to High Five and Highlights magazines that we share with our families. And then we have a Google site for the program that we share with our families, and it has specific resources related to language and literacy. And then another important part of the Infants and Toddlers program is connecting families with community resources. So exploring the library, including story times, and we have play groups in our local libraries that families are invited to attend. And then, of course, we have the Books from Birth program, which is part of the Dolly Parton Foundation. And each child in Prince George's County is eligible to receive a free book from birth until age 5 every month. So kind of helping connect families with some of these resources has been, a really important part of our program as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you highlighted kind of the interdisciplinary collaboration that's taking place within your program. So I'm thinking about, for example, working on fine motor skills for writing with occupational therapists, getting insights from our speech therapists about speech production, and then connecting that to other literacy domains. So, and then you also highlighted the importance of exposure to reading activities and different types of reading materials through the other types of resources you're providing for your families. So thank you for giving this wonderful overview of what you're doing and what your team is doing to support families and supporting the literacy development of our autistic learners in Maryland.
Thank you, Dr. Kang.
So much. We talked about early childhood and early literacy, and in connection to that, I wanted to switch gears to talk about with Dr. Seyma and Intepe what teacher training and professional development looks like to better support our teachers. So Dr. Seyma and Intepe, she's an assistant clinical professor. Her research interest focuses on literacy skills, vocabulary intervention, reading comprehension for students with autism, and teacher preparation in special education. She teaches a variety of courses, both for our undergraduate and graduate students related to severe disabilities. And she also serves on multiple committees, and she is a principal investigator for our Office of Special Education Program, or OSEP grant, for the teacher preparation program. So after hearing a little bit from Ms. Fleury, I'm so excited to learn from Dr. Intepe about what her experience has been in relation to teacher preparation. So Dr. Intepe, if you are ready for our first question here, I'm looking for her Zoom box here in our participant window. Double checking.
Hey, hi everyone. Have a great evening. Thanks for having us. So I would like to share my perspective on teacher education, teacher prep. And the first question, like how is the higher ed preparing gen ed and special educators to teach autistic students to learn to read? So I want to talk about like how we prepare, how we train our future special education teachers. So in our program, we ensure to teach teacher candidates, like both gen ed and special educators, receive multiple reading foundational courses that focus like literacy instruction, 5 pillars, like assessment, like making lesson plan. So, and I think they are very important. Like they need to know like first what is like reading, like what kind of components reading has. And so we are in I also taught gen ed for our general education teacher candidates about disabilities. So both classes, both groups have some like knowledge about the disability and autism and reading. So we emphasize universal design for learning, UDL. I am sorry I couldn't put the longer version. Like UDL is like there's an education framework actually that guides teachers designing their lessons, provide multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression. And basically, it emphasizes flexibility and accessibility for everyone, including students with disabilities. And we make sure like they learn, they imply UDL in their classroom and individualized instructions and other things. Like it is just like adjustments to the instruction materials or learning environments. Then they can support the specific learners needs without changing the learning expectation, like they are putting more individualized instruction. And I know Dr. Kang talk about evidence-based practice. So evidence-based practice, we know like what works, right? So, and we are emphasize evidence-based practice, like explicit instruction. For example, if we talk about the literacy, like pre-teaching, any modeling, visual supports, systematic and explicit instruction, like we cover all evidence-based practice they are using in their internship. They are learning and apply in their internship. And they have a long year internship experience, so they are applying what they have learned by using strategies. Students with disabilities range from low to high intensity. I think this is my end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Intepe. So I think you're highlighting the kind of the value of collaboration between general education and special education teachers. You were highlighting some of the support that's happening within our literacy classes at UMD that looks at different ways of adapting assessments for students coming from different learning and ability backgrounds. And I can think of, because I happen to be in one of those literacy courses as an instructor, I remember working with our UMD students to create individualized approaches, such as making a visual schedule and thinking about positive ways of supporting behavior. So I know Ms. Fleury mentioned about neurodiversity affirming approaches. So really thinking about that strength-based approach and thinking about kind of the person-centered, what is the student's preferred modality of communicating some of the literacy skills that we're talking about, what is their preferred activity perhaps that we can work towards, so that we really focus on this learning activity for X number of minutes, and then we have this really rewarding activity. So we make it a really fun, engaging experience for our students. So those are some connections I'm making as I'm listening to you describing the different courses that we have to prepare our teachers. So thank you for sharing those examples. So building on to that, my next question for Dr. Intepe, we wanted to hear a little bit more about, I know you mentioned those 5 pillars of reading, but could you please share with us some of the most critical skills and knowledge you believe teachers today need and can benefit from to best support literacy development of our autistic students?
Absolutely. Yeah, I already mentioned about like we have to train them, we have to teach them literacy fundamental knowledge on the 5 pillars. And there's a nice visual about what are the 5 pillars, like phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary comprehension, like they need to know all well, right? So secondly, I want to say like knowledge of the autism characteristic and learning profiles, because students with autism have different learning style, learning characteristic. Their needs are unique. So I think knowing the autism overall, it is very helpful for all teachers candidate, and then they can adjust what is the like what they need in terms of materials, instruction, in terms of like learning environment easily, and yeah, and it will be more effective teaching. And we all talk about like we are teaching evidence-based practice, especially like I put couple example. They are like one of the common evidence-based practice to teach literacy, like visual supports, systematic instruction, shared book reading. And so they are just important, and they need to know. Knowing is not enough. We also ask them to apply, and they are doing in the internship, in the couple classes, they require tutoring experience, so they do this. So I don't want to just talk about the University of Maryland College Park. Like this kind of application, internship, and like literacy class is like fundamental across the all different college. There's accreditation process for the literacy. They have to teach literacy very strongly, regardless of the university, regardless of the college, because it is important. Literacy is the core for everything. So it is very important for all teacher candidates. And also like any, like I taught the class teaching students with disabilities for future general education teachers. And I always told them, you know, whatever you learn in your literacy class, in your like math class, you are able to use all the strategies to apply to students with disabilities with accommodation. I always tell this because they might freak out sometimes, because they are just taking one or two special ed classes, and they are like, how we teach, we will have students in our class. Yes, they do. But like I always tell, like, don't be think like you are just taking one class. No, you are learning how you are going to do a command or modify the instruction materials, and you can use any strategy based on these skills. So yeah, I just give the overall perspective. Yeah, and we also like we touch base like culturally responsive instruction, and it is very important for literacy development, because they might see different diverse students in their classroom, diverse learners in terms of the linguistic, in terms of the background. So just they have to be aware, be mindful about the different culture and culturally responsive instruction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think we'll hopefully hear from our other panelists what their perspectives are around kind of incorporation of culture too. Thanks for sharing that. Before we dive into our third panelist, could you mind quickly just sharing some of your perspective around teacher preparation changing to support moving literacy for autistic students in Maryland, particularly connection to the blueprint?
Absolutely. Like shortly, Blueprint emphasize like high quality, diverse teachers and leaders, which is very important for all teacher candidates. And they also emphasize like more resources for students to be successful. These are very important, and I see like more support, more encourage for these two pillars, especially these two pillars on the blueprint. And of course, they also emphasize like more collaboration between gen ed and special ed. And we are also support this collaboration because they need to collaborate. And like all UDL, I talk about the UDL a lot, and like college career readiness. So like maybe we can more focus on this side and just ensure they are ready for the college, and we are giving enough skills to be ready college. But yeah, just we must ensure that schools have enough resources and high quality diverse teacher, and it is very aligned for the blueprint, and which I appreciate to see the effort and support.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to hear from different perspectives, from our teacher preparing perspective and our early intervention. We'll switch gears a little bit to hearing from Miss Lauri Silver. She's the instructional facilitator and special ed technology expert in the instructional access team in the Howard County Public Schools. I see that Miss Lauri kind of provided an overview of her county and the number of schools and students that are being served. Ms. Silver, do you mind going through kind of any kind of the highlights that really describe the student population you're working with, and then we can dive right into, I believe, kind of the overview of your instructional access team description, and then our questions as well.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me with you all here tonight. I work in Howard County Public School System, and I am the instructional facilitator for the instructional access team. And so basically, we do everything assistive technology. So just to kind of outline for you the students that we support as well as the staff, we have 78 schools in Howard County, and there are approximately 60,000 students. We support students with assistive technology needs from ages 0 to 21 who receive special ed services, who have IEPs and IFSPs. We also support students with 504 plans. So just the numbers are down there, but you all can read those numbers. But just to give you a sort of picture of the students that we're supporting and where we're supporting them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think this slide is for you to kind of do a quick introduction of your access team. Sounds like it involves speech language pathologists, instructional facilitators. Anything you want to highlight before we dive into our first question?
Sure. So our team, we have 4 members, full-time members of our team. We have, my background is a special educator. Then we also have a speech language pathologist, and we have 2 program assistants who support us with all of our technology and lots of support going on nonstop. And so we're a small team, but we are mighty. And so we really try and zero in on supporting staff who are working directly with the students, helping build their capacity to understand assistive technology, learn how to take data regarding which are the best tools for students, talking about continually taking a look at if the assistive technology tools are continuing to support the students. Also implementing it in daily instruction. We talk about that. We do training on specific tools as well as, to support specific topics. We'll zero in on, assistive technology tools to support math as well as reading, writing. We also support all the students who use augmentative and alternative communication. So we do a lot to professional learning to teach staff how to use the communication devices, speech language pathologists. We really do collaborate with every member of a school-based, of a school. We touch all members, which is really exciting when we talk about collaboration, which I think is coming up next. And so, yes, we're on to the question.
Yeah, please share with us. I know you have 2 slides related to this question. How do you support access and literacy in your role?
So we have lots of specific accessibility or assistive technology tools that support with building independence for students, especially around literacy. So providing supports like text-to-speech for students who have difficulty with decoding, but their auditory comprehension is very high. So these tools provide access to all the instructional materials for students when they have barriers with decoding. We also help with teaching the educators how to create visual supports where they can not only support our literacy, but also behavioral motivation, all of the visuals that have been discussed earlier in the presentation. So we help to teach people how to feel comfortable creating those visuals. We also talk a lot about just accessible materials of instruction, because a lot of times teachers will want to use technology tools with their students for reading and writing and math, but unless it's accessible for the student, then it's not helpful. So we talked about how they can create their classroom materials in a more accessible way, as well as talking about when students have barriers with access, what are some alternative ways students can be able to be independent in their classroom environment, as well as in the community and at home. There are other tools like there's speech to text, which, for students who are more efficient showing their knowledge verbally than through written format as well. And one unsung hero of the assistive technology tools that I forgot to list here is word prediction, which is an amazing tool for students who have difficulty with spelling. So when we look at all the tools and they're able to be used together, and we try and really work on students being advocates for themselves, making sure that they're speaking up for all the tools and resources that they need. But when these tools are put together and students are comfortable using the tools, really can build so much independence, confidence, all of the pieces, especially as they mature and go through school in middle school and high school as well.
Thank you so much. I think you're highlighting the importance of like that material prep piece, which is it's a separate step in addition to planning for a lesson and thinking about what skills to target. So I can definitely see the importance of that. Should I dive right into the second question, or did you want to add anything else about AAC usage or any other of your practices related to supporting access and literacy?
So just really fast about our AAC usage, we have over 600 students who have AAC communication systems in our school system. And we allow for a lot of flexibility within that area. We really look at the students' strengths. We look at their barriers. We talk about AAC systems that are building, it's more on a category basis. We definitely discussed using core vocabulary and then adding that fringe vocabulary. Also for our students who are more motor plan learners, we have alternative communication systems for them, if you've heard of LAMP. So we really look at where the student is, what kind of barriers, what are their strengths, and what would be the best modality for them as far as finding alternative ways for them to communicate. We do a lot of training and support with our speech language pathologists. And then a lot of times when we're looking at communication systems for students, we bring in other therapists, such as the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, when students need access to their voices all day long. We want to make sure that their devices are properly mounted on their wheelchairs, or that they can access it in every location throughout the school day, at home as well, and in the community. So we do a ton of work around augmentative and alternative communication.
Thank you for doing all of your work and making sure all those settings are ready for the literacy learning. The second question is related to collaboration. What does that look like across professionals, family members that you're working with?
So collaboration is our middle name. We cannot do anything without the support of the team members and the student and the family. And so we try and provide like a flexible approach to supporting staff, because we first of all want to meet staff where they are with their comfort levels. Sometimes we will do more direct support. It's, with going into the school, observing a student, really talking very specifically about the barriers and helping the team figure out how to address the barriers the student's experiencing. We also provide ongoing professional learning sessions. So we do it for larger groups, like we oftentimes meet with the speech language pathologist as a whole, or we'll meet with the middle school teachers, working with students with with a variety of disabilities. We also do smaller groups because we know people and their time. It's so hard for teachers and for support staff and related service providers to get away from the classroom. So what we try and do is just say, we will cater our support to whatever you need. We'll go in person and meet. We'll do it virtually. We take text messages or on the phone. We are just constantly trying to, you know, even if it's 10 minutes that we can get time together, we make sure we do that. Another piece of this is that we're trying to really build up our resources that are considered just in time. Just when the teachers or the speech pathologists or the paraeducators need, how do I use this tool with my student? I don't want to wait to hear from a person. We've really built up, we have a Canvas community that is accessible for all staff in Howard County Public Schools, and we have the majority, probably all of our materials are up on our Canvas site, and we're always making new ones. We're always adding, we're always building, especially the pace in which technology changes and tools get updated. And one night we go to bed and it looks a certain way. We wake up the next morning and it looks different. So we've really got to be, you know, moving with the times as far as changes in the tools to support our, you know, everyone that we're working with. And then we also provide monthly sessions for families. We the dates are put out throughout the county, all different ways, but we send it to our team leaders to send to their families. We're really trying to figure out how we can reach, you know, far and wide so we can get more participation. But we provide monthly sessions for families, one each month on communication to support students who are using alternative communication systems. And then we also do a session for reading and writing tools that are talking about those tools that are the most used in the county. But we also continue with doing professional learning for family members. You know, we'll just meet online and help discuss a situation if they're having problems. So we really try and provide the most flexible support, and the only way to do it is with this collaboration with all members of the team.
Awesome. Thank you for making those resources available for the different people involved. Before we dive into our next panelist, would you mind sharing with us maybe some one or a few examples of the challenges and your solutions to address them?
Yeah, so the one size fits all tools don't meet diverse needs. When we got out of COVID and during COVID, and a great thing was that devices were rolled out, more devices were rolled out for students on a one-to-one basis. But people get very comfortable with a certain tool, and it's hard sometimes for people, not the educators, but even like when you're working with larger school systems, to understand that yes, we do give out Chromebooks, but sometimes that's not the best choice for all students. We need to be flexible in the things that we're providing. And so we just want to make sure that when we're looking at sort of like those tools that, you know, are rolled out in a system, to make sure you understand that with assistive technology, there's no such thing as, you know, one size fits all. And that's, you know, for all students with disabilities and, you know, general ed students as well. And so we're involved in a lot of different committees throughout the county to make sure that that lens is always being communicated, to understand that, you know, one literacy program does not, you know, fit the needs of all students. And overall, I mean, really, I've been with our county for a while, and I've seen a huge shift. And so, but it's always important to keep that in mind when working with, you know, a larger school system.
Thank you so much for highlighting that importance of individualization for our learners. We really enjoyed learning from Ms. Lauri Silver about access in terms of literacy instruction. I want to switch gears to our fourth panelist, Ms. Toni Simmons. She's a speech language pathologist working with students from kindergarten to 5th grade. in Howard County Public Schools, and we're really excited to learn about her experience in terms of literacy support. So, Ms. Simmons, do you mind sharing a little bit about how you support literacy development for children with diverse communication modalities and what your particular role is as a speech language pathologist?
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here. Working with many students, it's always, most of the time it is grouped. So you definitely have to meet students where they are, and that won't always be on the same level. But most importantly, working with that oral language first. So building that foundation of having that conversation, the vocabulary, sentence structure, understanding those stories when we're reading books. For those students that need visuals and AAC devices, using, and those aren't always the same across the board. So making sure that each child does have access to those visuals or their AAC device in whatever way they do communicate, to help with reading and writing. And also working with the OT, just meant the special educator, and the school psychologist. Even there's many team members that do go in together to make sure that literacy is being targeted all throughout the day and not just in small sessions or those small minutes. It is definitely something that is happening all the time.
I think you're finding that importance of working with different providers kind of as a team.
Yes.
Question, do you mind sharing what are some ways local education agencies could include speech language pathologists more in literacy development?
Yeah, I definitely would say that explicit direction. So there is things like, I know that being in school that it could be you targeting phonological awareness, but that is usually left for the special educator to target. So kind of giving that direction of specifically in an elementary school, what does that look like for literacy specifically? And then that the ability to collaborate is always so short in a school when there's so little time that would be that limit in some ways, just to help with that literacy development would be a couple of them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can definitely agree that the more support, and especially thinking about individualization, can be helpful.
Yes.
Do you have any other kind of challenges and solutions that you have run into that you have used to make that literacy instruction and collaboration more effective as in your role?
Yeah, it definitely does help, just knowing in the building those meetings that we do have sometimes, to see like what is happening. Like Ms. Silver did explain, like things are constantly changing and developing in the day, in a day, in a year, or even smaller. But what that looks like at that floor of where we are working with the students. So trying to just make sure that's used across the board from top to bottom. And sometimes just having the literacy or even the SLP's role in literacy that not everyone knows in the school building what that looks like, and how to support in that way. Because I know sometimes it's like, oh, well, Johnny has a hard time with this assignment. Like, what does that look like? But there can be so much more than just helping with an assignment. But yeah, it starts small but gets big because there could be so many things to work on, but just trying to pinpoint where each student is needed and what that looks like.
I'm hearing that if there is a challenge that we're running into, kind of really working together to identify what the reason is behind, if that's related to maybe the environment that can be modified or the material, it might be related.
Yes.
That we're really working together to really understand as a whole picture what's happening with the student.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Ms. Simmons, for your wonderful insights coming from your speech point of view. We'll now switch gears to our another special education teacher in our panel today, Ms. Sarah Cooper. She works with second and fifth grade students as a team leader, as a special education teacher at Bougie Park Elementary. She did her undergrad at UMD. She's joining back as a PhD student now in the fall. So we are really excited to hear from you, Ms. Cooper. So would you mind sharing with us a little bit, what evidence-based practices do you use in your classroom to support autistic students?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So when I'm thinking of evidence-based practices, I want to highlight all of this by saying above anything we talk about today, the key thing to keep in mind is forming relationships with your students and prioritizing that absolutely above anything else. If your students don't trust you, if they don't know you, if they don't like you, they won't put their best effort, you won't get the best outcomes out of them. So before I even talk about a strategy, I just want to reiterate how important it is to really take that time to get to know your learner and what they need to be successful. When thinking about the strategies to use in the classroom, I always try to align everything that I do with our reading rope here. If you've never seen the reading rope before, it breaks down the key components in teaching literacy and how they all intertwine together to help students become skilled readers. So when you're thinking about what your students need to learn in order to develop literacy skills, it really is the elements of this literacy rope and how they all work together to help our students learn to read. One of my favorite practices to use in teaching is gamification. If you've never heard of it, basically it's turning things into a game. If you ask my students what we do in reading group, they probably would tell you that we play games. And I promise you, we're also learning too. But the more that you can get your students to buy in and make learning fun and engaging, the better outcomes you're going to get from your students. And again, forming those relationships and tying it into things that they're interested in and interests that they have will really help you as well.
I really love that gamification approach you highlighted. Thank you, Mr. Do you mind also sharing that you're using all of these wonderful strategies? What do you think are some training or additional training opportunities that have helped you or could help you further to become more effective to work with the autistic students?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I would recommend is any type of phonics training program. I personally did the Orton Gillingham intervention program, which teaches you a lot of great strategies that use multisensory approaches and basically give you an understanding of phonics. If you've never taught phonics before, you might think, oh, I know how to read, I can teach phonics. You can't. There's a lot of nuances to it and things that maybe you assume that you know that you don't. And honestly, I personally learned a lot through a lot of my phonics training. So I would recommend getting any type of explicit instruction on phonics and phonemic awareness. And then another training that was specifically helpful in working with students with autism was the safety care training, which is a crisis prevention and management. We know that our students can have behaviors, and what I love about safety care is it does give you the management strategies to support a student in crisis, but it really emphasizes the prevention strategies and all of the supports you can put in place to help your students stay regulated and de-escalate. And obviously, the more that we can stay in a state of regulation, the more access we're going to have to instruction.
Yeah, I think you're highlighting the importance of really knowing how to teach literacy. And then I'm hearing that in connection with what we talked about from neurodiversity affirming approach, thinking about co-regulating and supporting our learners to also self-manage as they're engaging in literacy learning. So thank you for pointing that out as well. Last question I wanted to share with you, what have been some challenges and solutions to address them as a teacher?
Yeah, so obviously we all know we have a limited resources and trained staff. So I think something that I have had to learn in my experience in the classroom is trusting your knowledge, trusting your professional judgment, and allowing yourself to create your own materials or modify intervention programs to meet the needs of your students. It goes back to forming those relationships and really understanding. I think a lot of times we get a script for an intervention and we assume that in order to implement it with fidelity, you follow it to a T. We know a lot of our students are not going to sit through a scripted intervention. So I like to cherry pick certain elements from different interventions that I know are going to meet the needs of my students. So giving yourself that grace to modify and adapt and accommodate interventions in a way that makes sense for you and your learners. Trying to be consistent in your routines and your schedules, meeting your students where they're at. And then tracking consistent data, taking the time to train your paraeducators and your student assistants on how to take data so that way you have a consistent picture on what your students are able to do, not just when they're with you, but across their school day.
Awesome. You're highlighting the importance of clear communication of students' progress. and using data to do that. So thank you so much, Ms. Cooper, for sharing your insights. I can definitely picture your students really enjoying learning through games and other opportunities. So thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we're very excited to chat with Ms. Carr here. She mentioned she'll dive right into answering some of the questions and quickly introduce herself. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Carr right away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kang. And I want to thank Dr. Bulger and Ms. White and all of the other panelists. It's really exciting to see what is now happening with literacy and children on the spectrum. So I am here strictly as a parent. So I just want to, if you want to go to the next slide, Dart, I'm going to jump right in. I want to kind of give an overview of my child with autism due to the fact that that may show where my perspective is coming from. So first and foremost, he is 24 years old. So that will age me. So he has been out of school for 3 years, and before that dealing with the pandemic. So I can go back, and I don't know, everybody dealing with 3 is going to cringe, but I happened to look at one of his old IEPs from first grade, and the instruction for the SDI literally said whole word instruction. So to see the change that has happened is wonderful. So my perspective is what I have seen, and I'm grateful, like I'm hearing the things from the other panelists that what I have seen and what I'm recommending is happening. So the big thing that I've learned, these 4 things, is understanding how your child processes information. Are they visual learners? Are they, or like, when I started down this autism path, we didn't call it speech therapy. Disney was speech therapy. So like, how is the child acquiring language? My child scripts inappropriate times, and also understanding oral language. And so this is my perspective. My child is verbal, movie script verbal. So I always know the difference between what's coming as a script and what's his natural language. And understanding too, where oral language plays in the development of reading and writing as well. The other thing is memorization versus reading skills. So he loves dinosaurs, still does. And at the age of 4 could look at a box of a dinosaur. And I thought, oh, great, he's reading that word. That says, triceratops. No, he memorized it. But as he got on, that actually did help in some areas, but he could not decode a word. So understanding the difference between the two, and then also knowing, depending on your child, the difference between acquiring a skill and meeting what I like to call an academic expectation or a grade level performance. Because a lot of times, depending on our children on the spectrum, they aren't going to make that academic expectation could be anywhere from 7 to 10 years, but we want to make sure that they actually acquire the skill of literacy.
I'm hearing maybe so one of the many strengths that it sounds like your child has, including the good memorization skills, and also highlighting that grade or score is not everything to capture students' literacy skill. It's every individual progress that our learners make. Thank you.
Thank you. So what has been most helpful for me as a parent is understanding, and I didn't put this on here, but what was the most helpful in understanding his literacy is the fact that he has 2 siblings with dyslexia. So I had to learn the science of reading. I had to learn how my other children need to be able to learn how to decode and read and break the code, which then in turn allowed me to help my child with this on the spectrum. Because I was able to go in and say, listen, he's not decoding words. This is memorization. This is what I'm thinking, And they, to work with me. So that is, and I love Scarsborough throat, Ms. Cooper. So learn that as a parent, because there's tons of skills that are needed for a person to become literate. The other thing is the rate of your child's progress. And obviously from the turtle, my son's progress was slow and steady. And actually, he had very little progress in the whole word instruction, a lot of memorization, and he had slow and steady progress when we started introducing phonics instruction. So that also, and I'll get to that in the next slide, about looking between the skills and the academic expectations as well. And so that's where I'm talking about letting go of the norms. So once he started receiving that phonics instruction as a teenager later on, then we started seeing the slow and steady progress of him being able to actually decode and not having any kind of behaviors around trying to read. Because that was something else that I had to deal with, was we were throwing books and we were erasing, we were not trying to memorize 1,000 fry words because that iPad would go across the room when he was in 5th or 6th grade. So it was more of I focused on skill acquisition. So it did take him 3 or 4 years in a phonics program to acquire the ability to what we would consider a second grade foundational skill, but he now will decode a word or try to decode a word that he runs into that he doesn't know. One of the major challenges I also have found is educational silos. And what I mean by that is the silo of the intervention and the silo of instruction and the silo of the disability category. And this also is why his siblings for him were so important, because what I was hearing with them was, well, they have dyslexia, they're going to get this. He has autism, we're going to do this. No, 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 no. If you understand how literacy works and how reading works, you just you tailor it to him. And that's what I meant by silos. So we found what works. So he needed a computer program that taught him phonics. He needed, something else. I forget what the program, I want to say it's teaching that works. Miss Silver probably would know what I was talking about with the AT. So it's finding what works for your child. And one of the huge things that I'd like parents to understand is that you never stop teaching literacy skills, all of them, no matter how old they are, no matter what their progress rate is. I always looked at it as, and this also comes from his siblings, is we teach adults how to read. While we love early intervention, we know that's the best, but that doesn't mean that you stop doing that once they hit a certain marker. You just keep going. And that's one of the things I wanted to make sure parents understood.
Thank you so much for sharing. So you're highlighting it's the repeated and ongoing, and that it's very individualized, both in terms of the teaching process and then measuring progress. So thank you for highlighting that. And we really appreciate hearing from you, coming from the parent's perspective. And I can definitely see you're dyslexia, autism, literacy expert in so many different levels. So we really, really enjoy hearing from you and learning from you. Okay, so those are all of our 6 wonderful, amazing panelists, and I learned a lot by engaging in conversation. We are a little bit over time, and thank you all for your patience as we're going through. I do want to, if it's okay with our group, to have maybe some little bit of time for audience question and answer. Does that sound okay, Susan and panelists? I see Dr. Bulger unmuted as well.
Yeah, I'll be the voice of God since I'm not on camera. But so there are a couple questions in the chat. I know some have been answered, but we'll just start with one question from Tefa Koger. Are there any proven strategies, programs, or platforms that help elementary students with reading comprehension? I know Dr. Intepe said that there are some and we will have shared resources, but does anybody have any comments about programs for comprehension? Silence.
Programs around comprehension, and I think Ms. Cooper unmuted, and if others have other suggestions from their practice, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I would agree with what Dr. Intepe put in the chat, but I was also going to talk about the visualizing and verbalizing intervention is a really great one to help students learn how to visualize and articulate what they're reading while they're going through a piece of text. So that's definitely an intervention I would look into if you're looking for reading comprehension tools.
Awesome. Thanks, Ms. Cooper. And it looks like Ms. Maria McDowell also shared that as a suggestion. And then I think I see another member in our group today with their raised hand. I don't see the name, unfortunately, but do you mind sharing?
They could come off mute. Go ahead.
Hello. I was just wondering, how would you suggest adapting some of these to older students? For instance, the age group that I currently work with are 18 to 21-year-olds, but we do have a student who came to us recently who struggles a lot with their encoding, specifically with writing. And what sort of strategies would be useful in that scenario?
The question was literacy instruction strategies for our 18 to 21-year-old autistic learners. Any of the panelists? I wonder if any of our panelists have some suggestions or their thoughts.
I can go. So I think it goes back to what I was talking about with knowing your students and what they need to be successful, because I think really any intervention could be adapted to meet students in any grade level. When you're thinking about like the gamification strategy, for example, taking a game that your students love to play, or taking something that is interesting to them and tying that into your intervention or into what you're working on, pulling books that are of interest to them, having them, encode words. If they really like to play a certain game or watch a certain show, pull some words from that show. They can be nonsense words, they can be fantasy words, and just really tying whatever you're doing into your students' interests will help them buy in a lot. And that's something that you can do without having to change the way you're teaching, but just tying it in. Like, you can play the game and every time it's their turn, they have to spell a word before they go. It doesn't have to really require a lot of modification to the intervention. It's just something you can add in.
I saw Dr. Intepe on mute.
Yeah, I also want to add, if you are thinking like 18 years old, so maybe you might talk about some real life application, like job application, like transition, like maybe use more relevant age proper tags, age proper topics, like maybe whatever their interest, take this and use as an opportunity and provide some books to read for them. If it is too low reading, if we are talking about very low, maybe you might use other strategy with accommodation for the 18 years old as well, like whatever their level, their needs, needs to match.
I think the ongoing theme is knowing the chronological age is helpful, but also knowing kind of their developmental skills, whether that's their literacy, their language skills, their cognitive skills, and then just knowing what target skill we can work towards that's slightly above their skill is what I'm hearing from Ms. Cooper and Ms. Intepe. So whether that's decoding or writing essays or comprehension, I think what I'm hearing is targeting the skills that can be beneficial for the student. I can also think of maybe like self-management strategies too. I know we talk about that a lot in writing. So like self-guided self-management framework and using graphic organizers, I think aligning with what we said about creating structure and expected rules and routines within the instruction. I wonder if that can be also helpful for the students you're working with. Creating that organized opportunity for the learning.
So there's a question. If a kindergarten student has not received any early intervention services, what is the best way to catch them up on classroom preparedness? If they're missing the foundation of being in the classroom, what is the best way to help them so they can improve their literacy, understanding, and skills? This person talks about the fact that they have a regular routine, peer adult modeling, but some students still don't understand what being in the classroom or in classroom means. So those classroom rules and the routines.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if it's okay, Ms. Fleury, if I point to you, because I know you talked a little bit about school readiness and transition to kindergarten. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions around this question?
Yeah, I was about to unmute, so I appreciate that. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is potentially the use of a social story about classroom expectations or even what it means to come to school. I've had a lot of success using social stories to prepare students for the transition into the classroom. First then boards have been particularly helpful for a lot of my students, and once they understand the concept of the first then board, even moving toward a longer visual schedule of the expectations of the day, or even mini schedules of the expectations within each activity, I find really helpful for transitioning students who don't have experience in the classroom, because it really is a learned skill, understanding classroom expectations. So those are some of the first things that come to mind. If anyone else has anything to add, I'd love to hear as well.
Thank you so much. So I'm hearing some stories that can kind of prime the students to be prepared and maybe visually expect what kind of behaviors that other peers might be engaging in. I'm also thinking maybe some less structured activities that can still teach some literacy skills. I wonder if that can be helpful as well. So if you're thinking about, oh, my child might not be sitting in a circle or in the desk with their peers in the structured physical space, then can we think about other creative ways so that they're still engaging in some learning around the skills that their peers are working on. So that's another thought I had. But thank you also, Ms. Ferry, for your input and suggestions.
We may have probably time for one more question. And I think this is probably a pretty good one, maybe a little long, a little like hard to answer, but when talking about students who need communication devices, particularly those who are non-verbal, and how would you recommend, or what would you recommend beyond a core board if they're new to school and don't qualify for a communication device, and students who who can read multisyllabic words but struggle with comprehension? So there's a two-part question. What would you suggest to increase students' comprehension? So we've talked about that. So we could go back to the first one about the communication devices and what to do for those students who are entering nonverbal and may not yet qualify for a communication device.
I can help with addressing this question. The first thing is that students don't qualify or not qualify for communication devices. It's more about meeting the students where they are. And when you're looking at students who maybe are not understanding the power of communication through a core board, something like that, it's always a great place to start to make sure that the students understand initiation. And in order to teach that power of communication and teach that initiation, a good place to start is with PreKs. When students are able to use a single picture or a combination of pictures to actually physically hand the pictures to someone to start with. PreKs is a systematic way of fading back those prompts, but that the students understand when I hand you a picture of something, I can request a motivator, something that I'm passionate about, then they start to see that connection, the understanding that if I initiate this and I select the right visual or picture and give it to someone, then I will receive that item or that activity that really motivates me most. But then moving along with that, a big piece of it is that always evaluating and assessing which visuals do my students respond to best. Is it a photograph? Is it a line drawing? Do they need a high contrast background with a lined drawing? There's something called Toby symbols where they're line drawings, but they're cut, or they could actually be photographs, but each one is a different shape. So that helps visually help them understand. Some students use actual items to begin with, and understanding when I hand someone this item, there's something that I'm going to receive or is going to happen that I find motivating in return. The other thing is to figure out the best way your students respond. Is my student a direct selector? Are they going to point to what they're interested in showing you or picking up or playing with? Are they an eye gaze selector? Depending on students, different physical barriers, it may depend. Are they eye gaze? Are they scanners? Are they using a switch? All of those things are pieces of finding the right communication system to really custom fit where your students are currently functioning. And really working as a team, reaching out to instructional access team members, and all of the information is on our Canvas page. And helping to ask these kind of questions so that you know what kinds of things you're looking for in the classroom, and really that collaboration piece. So please reach out if you do have specific questions and you work in Howard County Public Schools or you're that you have a family member going to the school, and we can definitely support you. But I do know that all school systems around in Maryland have an assistive technology, either team or member or you know, an office that supports the assistive technology. So just reach out to your departments of special ed to see who the person or the team is to contact to have some deep conversations about finding the right fit for communication systems.
Yeah. So I'm hearing even analyzing assistive technology tools further, so we know how to make sure it's you know, completely accessible, looking at the different visual aspects and the physical features of the assistive technology we're using. I see Ms. Simmons raise her hand, so maybe we'll hear from her and we'll wrap up our conversation for tonight.
Yes, I just wanted to add that sometimes if PECS is not always available, because sometimes I know that happened to me once, and the child was not very receptive with what PECS was or what it had to offer. But it was a lot of like how she said, how do the child respond, starting with like yes, no questions even, or where they could just point or touch, or starting with just vocabulary based too, just learning different items, because it might be that they're taking a lot of information in and they're not ready to communicate expressively, but they might be a sponge and just soaking everything up. Whereas just learning items that are around, starting small, and learning preferred items too, even if they are nonverbal, just trying to see what they are best work with, to try to build that relationship and then build upon that for receptive and expressive language.
Thank you for adding on to ensure how we can engage and support the use of assistive technologies as well with our learners. Okay, should we transition to the feedback survey now? Would that be a good idea? Okay. So thank you all of our panelists for your wonderful insights and your input. This is a QR code to our feedback survey. We would love to hear from you what you really enjoyed learning, what you would like to learn more from future panel events. We'll make sure we share this link in a second as well in the Zoom chat, but I'll switch it over to perhaps Ms. White so that or Dr. Bolger so that they can also highlight some of the upcoming events as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to take everybody off of there. Gotta remove the spotlight from everybody. So yeah, thank you everybody. And I want to thank all of our panelists, and thank you, Dr. Kang, for your leadership tonight. This was a fantastic, and this is a topic that we do not often talk about. We don't often bring to the spotlight. So, and I definitely want to highlight Susan here, who said we really need to do this topic of, and she's been saying to me for over a year now, I feel like, that this is a topic that needs to be addressed. And as my wife is a special education teacher who has an AAC classroom, and I got to teaching it, you know, just a couple weeks ago. You know, that working with this population, you know, working with populations who have, you know, are on the spectrum and have these communication difficulties is, we think of it as how would we, you know, accommodate. And what I've seen across the board, both tonight and in other instruction, is that the same, I think it was said over and over again, that oftentimes the same approaches work. It's just the types of accommodations that we provide in order to have those, implement those approaches. So I really want to thank all of our panelists tonight, and to you, Dr. Kang, for really bringing this to light, and to you, Susan, as well.
Thank you. And we just want to highlight some upcoming events that were in the works for the summer. We always do a book study, so we're going to dive into some writing guides. And then a big topic that's happening now with different districts with MSD, and it's a hot topic, is MTSS and reading. So we're looking to jump into the conversation in August. The National Reading League is doing a book study on the book by Stephanie Stoller, and then we're planning an event to follow up and talk about how it applies to Maryland school districts. And we hope we can see some of you there this summer. Thanks again, everybody, for coming.
And Mile, and just to let you know, Mile also has a couple of events. You can go to the Mile website, mile.umd.edu, and there are multiple events coming up on May 31st on dual language, and one on dual language and one on science of reading approaches, particularly for looking at speech and language pathologists and special ed teachers, as well as general education teachers. So thank you.
To learn more about the Reading League, check us out on social media, online. We hope maybe some educators are interested in joining our group. We'd love to have you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.